दहशत करती है।
The Masoods, Afridis, Wazirs, and Swatis, all tribes of the newly formed Pakistan, waited with Brigadier Akbar Khan for a signal from the other side of the border. The plan had been formulated as early as the 20th of August, 1947. The two guards were to kill their supervisors and open the bridge on the River Neelam. Without a problem, the traitors went about killing other sleeping guards, and within minutes of opening the bridge, thousands of raiders had rolled their way into the Indian town Muzaffarabad. On the night of October 21st, Pakistan's first national security plan began without a hurdle: the plunder and rape of Kashmir.
There were few takers for Jinnah's two-nation theory in Jammu and Kashmir. This was evident during Jinnah's visit to Srinagar in 1944, when he was greeted with black flags and was forced to leave in haste. Syed Mir Qasim, former chief minister of J&K, states that the theory was an anti-people philosophy which sought to widen and institutionalize communal differences within the Indian society.
India's independence on August 15, 1947 was accompanied by the partition of the country into two dominions, as Pakistan declared independence on August 14, 1947. With the intent to throw over Maharaja Hari Singh's government, the newly formed independent state of Pakistan launched an attack using 20,000 tribal men.
Thousands of raiders had rolled their way into the Indian town Muzaffarabad. On the night of October 21st, Pakistan's first national security plan began without a hurdle: the plunder and rape of Kashmir.
In Pakistan's first use of Islam's ancient call of jihad for an illicit illegal purpose, Pakistani officials, aided by the Pir of Manki Sharif, a man with thousands of followers among tribals, had managed to convince every major tribe to put together at least one Lashkar for the invasion. The Pathans of Khyber, who didn't heed the call for an ill-devised holy war, were cajoled with promises of plunder and women. In the first 3 weeks of October, jihad fever burnt through northwestern Pakistan. Brigadier Akbar Khan, director of the Weapon and Equipment Directorate at the General Headquarters, requisitioned 4,000 rifles meant for the Pakistani police to arm the Lashkars. Once a fighter was recruited by the Pirs of Manki Sharif in Wana, he was sent to the nearby police station, given a rifle and asked to report for training near Abbottabad and Murree, two prominent towns east of Rawalpindi. The training camps were set in secret locations, so the British controlling the Pakistani army don't know of the mobilization. In no time, around 5,000 tribals from the Kabali tribe were assembled at Batrasi across the Kashmir border, ready to launch a lightning attack.
On paper, the plan was perfect. Kabalis gathered at the border would seize the town of Muzaffarabad with the help of Muslims in the Maharaja's army recruited by Pakistan. Once Muzaffarabad was secured, the invaders would advance towards Srinagar, barely 100 miles away, and force the Maharaja to accede to Pakistan. Once Srinagar fell, Jinnah would send his army officially to take control of the new province and announce to the world that the K in the ill-thought-out acronym Pakistan was finally complete.
In Brigadier Akbar Khan's own words, the lorries were full to the brim, carrying 40, 50, and some as many as 70. Men were packed inside, lying on the roofs, sitting on the engines and hanging to the mudguards. He envisioned himself with these men in the company of Genghis Khan, Tamerlane and Mahmud of Ghaznavi, the raiders not freedom fighters. The murders in Muzaffarabad by the dawn of October 22nd seemed encouraging to the Pakistani officials handling the Lashkars, who now had an unguarded road all the way to Kashmir. Except the Kabali Lashkars now had different plans that did not involve listening to their Pakistani commanding officer.
The Kabalis first lined up the local population in the streets of the town and shot everyone who couldn't recite the Muslim kalima. When the murders were over, they started looting everything that caught their fancy, including petty stuff like hair oil and alum. Once they had looted every house and shop, the tribals loaded their stuff into lorries and drove back across the border to stash it away back home. Many took women with them, either to keep as slaves or mistresses or trade in the bazaars of Peshawar. In the medieval mayhem that razed the town, it did not matter who was Hindu, Sikh or Muslim to the Kabalis. All that mattered was the loot promised by Pakistan at the expense of Kashmir. After hours of cajoling, coaxing and haggling, Pakistani officials convinced their Lashkars to move forward. Their once unobstructed path now had obstacles thanks to Brigadier Rajinder Singh. His valor and strategy managed to hold the advancing Pakistani Lashkars for 3 days and Operation Gulmarg to stall even further. For 3 days, Singh led his men from the front, launching counterattacks, destroying bridges and stalling the enemy's advance. By the time the Maharaja of Kashmir had managed to call in the Indians to consult and advise, Brigadier Singh had already laid down his life, fighting to the last man on the outskirts of Baramulla.
Akbar Khan's planned strategy, titled Armed Revolt Inside Kashmir, was taking place in exactly the manner he had planned. The weapons procurement, the correspondences kept secret from the British generals still in the Pakistani dominion, and the military strategizing was all taking place. Up until this point, by Akbar Khan's own account, the Pakistani plan to invade and raid Kashmir was in successful action. This is where Pakistani history gets amnesia, and what is more, Akbar Khan claims to not know why his trained Kabalis lost 2 days after the conquest of Baramulla. He claims it must have been for some good reason. The good reason was simply a revelry in carnage. Most of the Hindu and Sikh families of Baramulla had already fled, paying a ransom for a ride to Srinagar. Those who stayed back had retreated to the outskirts, hoping for a miracle. The Kabalis from northwest Pakistan, who had never seen such a prosperous town, fell on it like a pack of ravaging beasts. The tribals found their target in a British convent and hospital in the middle of the town. Over the next 2 days, the nuns and nurses at the convent and adjoining hospital, its patients, and the small European community were raped, looted, and murdered by the shouting, screaming Pathans.
Sheikh Abdullah, as the head of the emergency administration on November 16, 1947, said, "What happened in Kashmir adds altogether a new pattern of perfidy. Those tribal Pathans equipped with mechanized weapons of war scooped down on us, not merely as armed bandits, but as a centrally directed force, with the avowed object of subjugating our land to the vassalage of Pakistan at the point of the gun. They are criminals before history who exalted these invaders as the liberators of the people of Kashmir. They violated and abducted women. They massacred children, and they even dishonored the Holy Quran and converted the mosques into brothels."
News of the tribal invasion of Kashmir reached Delhi almost 48 hours after the first Pakistani lorry rolled across Muzaffarabad. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, immediately exhorted Lord Mountbatten to send the army to stop the tribals. But Mountbatten, who as the first Governor-General of India was also the Commander-in-Chief of the army, he was adamant that the Maharaja of Kashmir first accede to India. The instrument of accession was signed on October 26, 1947, with the Maharaja's promise that a government would be set up at a future date, headed by National Conference leader Sheikh Abdullah.
By evening, India had put together an infantry battalion of the 1st Sikh Regiment to launch the defense of Srinagar. A brave team of soldiers flew into Srinagar on Dakota Plains on October 27. Under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Dewan Ranjit Rai, the Indian Army reinforced the princely state forces, established a defense perimeter, and defeated the tribal forces on the outskirts of the city of Kashmir. After that, it was a game of dominoes besieged by the defense of Badgam, Shalitnag, Baramulla and Uri, which were recaptured from the tribal hordes. The Kabalis were pursued by the Indian army up until Poonch. With the accession of Kashmir to India and Kashmir legally becoming Indian territory, Pakistan once again sowed seeds of discord, which led to mutinies and an allowance of safe haven to the tribals now on backfoot in Poonch and Mirpur. In Mirpur, these Kabalis were reinforced not by logistics or commanding officers by Pakistan, but with a full infantry division this time. This encouragement led to another devastating massacre. The raiders entered Mirpur on November 25 and killed 10,000 of the captives who were held in Ali Baig. The government of Pakistan had built the Gurudwara as a safe house, a refugee camp. In reality, this was where women committed mass suicides in fear of falling into the hands of the tribals. The ones who didn't were dragged to lorries, transported to Pakistan and sold off. The Indian Army and the supporting National Conference militias were gaining victories, but the murder of Kashmiriyat was taking place at the hands of Pakistan. In an overture for peace, the Indian Prime Minister called on the international community to condemn Pakistani action. No such statements came, not from the former colonizer, not from the United States, and certainly not from the one international organization that India had placed its trust in that was created for the purpose of human security, the United Nations. The silence of the United Nations Security Council spoke volumes to the Kashmiri people. The toothless nature of the recommendations was not just a timid approach, it was an ineffective one. The failure to sanction Pakistan at this first attempts at corrupting Islam for its political benefit has given the world the gifts of Al-Qaeda, Taliban, ISIS, the Haqqani network and countless others. The militants of Lashkar-e-Toiba today, 75 years later, proudly claim to be direct descendants of the Lashkar Kabalis that came to plunder and loot Kashmir.
India's Governor-General Mountbatten flew to Lahore on 1 November 1947 for a conference with Muhammad Ali Jinnah, proposing that the accession should be decided by an impartial reference to the will of the people. Jinnah rejected the offer. Jinnah rejected the offer to allow the people to choose. That is a fundamental constituent of democracy. A mindset that was to define the ideology of Pakistan in the coming few years and make sure that no form of civil democracy will ever be in complete control. Sheikh Abdullah, in his speech on February 20th, 1948, said, "In 1944, Jinnah persuaded us to join hands with him and support his two-nation theory, but he failed." In another speech of May 2nd, 1950, he said, "There is nothing in common between Pakistan's ideology and our political faith. Pakistan's existence depends upon a hymn of hate. But the Jammu and Kashmir National Conference, sole representative organization of the people of the state, has all along maintained and wants to see the friendship and tolerance subsist among the various communities."
Memoirs of Jinnah accepts that tribal invasion was a criminal folly. And yet, 74 years later, they still continue to pollute the lands and minds of Kashmir's people by falsely distorting facts, calling India the aggressors, when the truth was and remains that they'd forced their ideology on innocent villagers. They raped innocent women. They set fires to entire villages and tore down homes of even those who shared their religious identity. Hindu and Muslim both were targeted by the false ideology, that is Pakistan.